This isn't like this isn't even a great line in the song. Well, it's so beautiful. It's hard to, there was a time, I'm backing up because the lyrics are so unbelievable. There was a time before we were born. If someone asked, this is where I'll be, where I'll be. We drift in and out, sing into my mouth, which is actually one of the greatest lines that I know of. Of all those kinds of people, you have a face with a view. This is what I want. You have a face with a view. I'm just an animal looking for a home and share the same space for a minute or two. So instead of thinking that as a person, I hope you're beginning to see that yoga has a face with a view, right? So like you actually, we're doing poses and we're doing stuff, and we're supporting each other, but the asana itself can give views. Like you can see, you hear trite lines that are actually true, where you can see like way into somebody's eyes or way past and see the expanse behind their head and or whatever. And like that's part of what happens for me with yoga. And I gotta say, when I came to yoga, and I hope some of you have had similar experiences, I was just an animal looking for a home, looking for wanting to share the same space for a minute or two, right? The space that's universal, that actually every body and every living organism actually gets to be at, right? And that is where we long to be. And for me, and it doesn't have to be yoga. For me, it ended up being, I was an animal looking for a home, right? And I was lucky that, and I love, you hear me say things like people have been here before you. Isn't it comforting? And that we don't have to figure all this out ourselves, because no matter what yoga pose you're in, someone's been there before you and they've left breadcrumbs and they help you get there and they do all these things, right? And the opening line in the song, I was born with a weak heart, right? And I kind of was at the end when I started yoga. It was like the path of the trajectory I was on was, I really did need to find a home. I was kind of coming to the model for me of overcoming my body was coming to, it wasn't going to work, right? The cultural meme we have about disability wasn't going to work. So I really was an animal looking for a home. And I was lucky that I got to look into the face of yoga. And I hope you get some of that too. So today, we're going to work on a pose. So this is a challenge about, well, actually, this class is Bethany's fault. I'm going to go grab something here. Um, because we're talking about, I tend to teach, when I teach seated standing poses, I tend to teach the core basic of standing poses so you can get a glimpse into other standing poses, because I don't like to complicate too much. Because if you can remember, one of my beliefs is that if you can get near the hub of the wheel in the movement, you can see the expanse. You can see into the face with a view. So I tend to not try to worry about, oh, I'm going to now teach you Warrior Two more than I am Trikonasana, triangle pose, or, I try to get you to get the core of what's happening. But today we're going to do that, but have it be a launching point into a more complicated standing pose. And you're gonna have to believe that you can see the expanse. Okay. And so I'm going to show you a picture of the pose, right? And you're going to go, what? And remember, I want to reiterate something. Know that all the insights I'm about to share, because I hadn't really thought about trying to teach Ardha Chandrasana half moon pose. half moon rising across the sky, right? I used to really like teaching this in person to more traditional bodies. But I've never done it. So like I want to reiterate the fact I've never done this pose. I've only been around this pose. And I know how to see into a face and see the view, right? All right, so here's a picture of the pose, and then we're going to start building a class around it, right? With the idea of you're going to have to see and feel prana in a way that it's going to be new for some of you, but it's the same that you've always been doing. So there's the pose, right? So there are a lot of, you usually come into it from triangle pose. And it looks like a lot of people, okay, remember I'm a snobby Iyengar teacher, so a lot of people try to come into Ardha Chandrasana kind of from balance right, but it's a very dynamic pose. And there's a real feeling of it. You don't just tip over into the pose. You actually are in warrior two, in the right angle, you'd come out over your down leg and then you rise up. So there's a very dynamic feeling in this pose when you get into it. And it's really hard. I can't like this back ankle when someone's doing it weighs like 3,000 pounds. Okay. So, but what's crazy about this pose, it teaches prana so much to a body that's dense in the mind, right? Traditional students, right? Because they've had too much access to stuff. If you come up and just very gently put your finger or your thumb on just lightly underneath this ankle and make proprioceptive contact, right? And Bethany, you need to touch it. The pose gets way easier, correct? Like it's crazy. There's no actual help. But suddenly, I mean, literally, it's the lightest touch on the skin that you can imagine that you need to do. But the mind all of a sudden realizes that it's not alone. And the balance doesn't have to be as fought for as it looks. And suddenly the prana opens up in the whole pose, right? But what you don't get about this pose is what a big twist it is. Okay, so this getting your body sideways like this, you come into it with your abdomen towards the floor, and then you come into it and start to fly. Okay, so, and you've got to get the sense of flying, right? If you don't get the sense of flying, the pose is going to be too crunched and heavy, right? And you're never going to like it. And a lot of people never like this pose. The crucial part of the pose energetically, besides this teaches you that the little touch here teaches you that you've been working way too hard. You forgot that, when effortful effort becomes effortless, you've encountered the fourth method of pranayama, of breathing, because your whole body breathes, and I hope over time you figure out what that means. But the crucial junction point of this pose is this upper hip. So one of the ways you teach this to a quote more traditional body is you have them put their back up against the wall. So you take the gravity struggle out of the pose. So the fright out of it. So when you struggle with gravity, you tend to squeeze too hard to try to win. Your mind tries to win. So if you put a practitioner up against the wall with their back to the wall, then you calm their back body, right? Which would be similar to softening the inside of your mouth. So like sit up straight and tall for a second and get quieter and allow and I say open to the back of the room, what's behind you. That's not just a throwaway nice instruction. That's a really important instruction. So when you put their back to the wall, you get them back body presence. But the junction, so if you really want to open up someone's pose when you're in person, you have their back against the wall and you press on their upper hip and you push it back into the wall, because and our hips aren't used to opening like that. And when it happens, it's like a volcano of not of heat, but of energy, right? Like all of a sudden you go like, oh my God, there's at the base of my spine, there is so much more strength than I knew, right? And vibrancy. And if I could just get better at getting my hips a little bit more open, I'd be able to drink at that pool way more often, at that stream, right? So for us and what we're going to do to have this pose start to have a face with the view, we're going to really need to get dynamic changes in the twist, right? But at the base of the spine. Now, the other thing I want to point out about this pose, well, there's a lot of things I could point out about this pose, is that look at all the empty space around it. You don't have to look up in the pose, by the way, Catherine. In fact, you should practice it looking up's the last part of the pose, right? You shouldn't try to do that, right? And it's just like freaking window dressing, turning your head up, yeah, whatever, right? All right, it does make it more joyful just a little bit, but I want you to see all this air in the pose. There's a real sense of flying here, right? So this is going to be incredibly heavy. It won't be when you're doing it sitting down, but I want you to get the expansive feeling, right? And that there really isn't that much touching the ground. The foot and the hand, everything else is flying. And what you see traditional practitioners screw up with is they think it's all physical. No, your body has to hover in space. Shavasana is going to be key in this pose. The calming inside. So you can feel the flying part of the pose. And do you think that, as a kid growing up, I loved the book, and I don't even remember why exactly, except I do, like Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Did anyone ever read that book when you were a little kid? Right? And the idea of flying and getting in different dimensions. And the one thing that part of the many, I haven't read the book since I was like 7 or whatever, right? But one of the maybe ones wasn't as good on repeat when I was young, but is that you're not flying by flapping your wings all the time. You know how when you're riding a bike, any of you that were lucky enough to ride a bike, when you finally get on, you just go, the momentum starts to carry you forward, right? Like you don't have to it's not nearly as hard. You're not holding and shaking. In Ardha Chandrasana and a whole bunch of more complicated yoga poses, there's that place that you hit where the flying just happens and you're flying without effort. Okay? So we're going to go for this pose. And we might have to go for it, come back for it, multiple classes, because we're going to keep going farther and farther. We'll see how we do today. So that's a long intro. But so if the flying sensation, see, especially when you're seated, you and I think I have my shirt on inside out. It's not funny. No, I don't. Good. So when you're seated, you're already kind of compressed, right? And so the flying sensation is really important to try to achieve in seated standing poses but you don't want the flying sensation just to be in your head. You want it coming from your spine. Okay. So we're not even going to center. I got a lot to do, right? So, all right, we'll center quick. We're supposed to, right? So sit up straight and tall and soften the inside of your jaw. Right. Feel the space around you because you're going to need to be able to cover your joints in space to get the flying part of Ardha Chandrasana. So I'm lifting my chest and all these extra words we've done here at the beginning. I want you to bounce a little bit in your spine before you center, right? I don't mean move around a whole bunch. I mean, know that you have a secret. You know how to see a face with a view, right? So I'm like getting ready. When I bounce a little bit in my body and start to go a little bit, I'm just doing this tiny little movements in my spine. I want you just your spine. I remember I taught a class on skipping. Was anyone in that class? Right? Like, so just between your sitting bones and your lower abdomen, bounce a little bit. Your tailbone goes up, your sitting bones go down, and let there be a little bit of rhythm. And know that when you do that, when you separate your sitting bones, right? Um, and you bounce a little bit up with your tailbone, you're right near the intersection part that's going to be important for Ardha Chandrasana. And I hope it makes you smile a little bit to bounce right there. Because shit, when you come up into Ardha Chandrasana, a pose I've never come into all the way, it's happy, right? That flying sensation matters. So I'm doing that little bounce because I know what I'm up to. I know where I'm going. All right. So now back to sitting up straight and tall. So certain spaces are going to really matter. That flying sensation of opening. Lift your chest, the grounding, but don't push down too much on the grounding. Find the space in each shoulder, find the space in each hip, find the space where each heel is, and add the bounce, right? Add the bounce. Because you're going to have to fly here and bypass some of the effort. Okay. And then now keep the sensation of the bounce because I don't want you to find the empty space and the flying from your imagination or disassociation. So I want you to lift your chest, but open the space, feel the space between your ear and your shoulder, and connect that to the space in the center of your sternum and the space behind you. Allow that your hips in your where your femur bone, where your socket is lighter. And now surrender to the grounding in your feet and make all of those points connected. And don't furrow your brow to connect them. That would be your mind taking too much charge. Let your spine touch all of the spaces at once, because it does. Lips together, teeth slightly apart. Soften your jaw. As you soften your jaw, find the emptiness in your hips. Lift your chest, make it dynamic. Feel your breath. Good. Prepare your mind to do Ardha Chandrasana. Good. And then release. So this lifting up and down, this thing that we do almost every class, and lengthen the spine some, right? Now you know that we're looking for the flying feeling that's going to come in Ardha Chandrasana. We're doing it for a purpose, right? So you're trying to coordinate all the things we've been doing at the beginning of each class. So you're coming forward, you're changing gravity, and you're lifting your chest, because you can know when you try to turn up into Ardha Chandrasana, right? You're going to have to coordinate a whole bunch of movement, right? So we're trying to get that feeling of lightness, of length combined with strength. So now I'm leaning forward on my table. You can do it on your thighs, and I'm hitting down with my sitting bones, and I'm making sure my low back, my sitting bones are hitting into the. This is like, we're not going for upward facing dog. We're going for a version in the spine of dog pose where my sitting bone hits into it. I extend my low back one vertebrae at a time, up, catch it with my chest, broaden across my sacrum, which broadens my diaphragm by my T12, right? Lift my sternum, broaden across my collarbones, and remember to fly. Good, and then release. So now, I mean, we're doing all the prep. So when we go all the hard stuff in this pose, right? Which is going to get we're going to go into small rooms, right? Some of you have been coming to class know what I mean by small rooms, where we're going to be really forceful in this class sometimes, right? So now I'm taking my legs wide, and I'm using rhythm again, like we've done a lot of times before, right? Right? I'm trying to get this to feel more open, because the final version of this pose, the legs are wide, right? But when you're sitting in a chair, taking your legs wide is going to take too much of the pose. So we'll do that in the final version. It's not the important version. So I'm going back and forth. I'm trying to get rhythm, grounding. So think about the core sensations I'm doing right here. I'm changing gravity, right? I'm coming down. I'm finding earth by pushing on my knees. I'm expanding by lifting my chest. And I'm wanting to be in rhythm. Because the people that try to fight their way into Ardha Chandrasana, they never get the joy of it, right? You rhythm your way into complicated poses, right? You don't just fight your way into it. So I'm doing this thing, and I'm going to do a little bit of this, of course, things we've always done, because this is actually going to be a crucial action, right? Think about that back leg going straight up for a second, like just see it. And the turn, right? The turn of the sternum. This is going to be one of the core actions that make this pose go. So we're visiting the pose already, right? We're starting to get, and I want you to be on rhythm, right? I want you to do it with like a kind of bounce and a kind of happening. All those twists that we've been doing when I lean forward and make them more grounded. But I want you to get that as you're doing this and you're kind of preparing, right? You're twisting and allowing the flying feeling, right? Like you're going for more here. You have a purpose here for these sensations, right? So we're just trying to open back to what's simpler again. The idea of, wait, I could just pop right up and stand here. In fact, a version of me actually does. I used to do this pose from the floor. I used to pop up onto my legs. It would be Prasarita Padottanasana, but you could just pop up here. I can still feel myself doing that 10 years ago when my shoulders were better. Like, yeah, I would just pop up. So I'm just like making sure I'm getting this feeling of expansive flying, right? Because when we go into the small rooms, it's going to be harder to feel this, right? Good. And then legs back together. Coming forward, finding the length in my spine again. Because remember, pushing on that upper hip against the person in the wall is going to open the pose. So when we eventually try to get it where chronically our leg is going out off to the side and you got one leg going down, and I hold up the back ankle like I would on a traditional body, right? You're gonna have to figure out how to feel that, right? Right. So I'm lengthening my back. I'm thinking this is gonna be fun. So I'm just rocking back and forth because I'm lucky than some of you. I got a wheelchair here. I'm not confined to some stationary piece of crap, right? I got something that freaking rolls because this pose is gonna have to rise across a dark sky. It's a half moon rising. Surprising light coming across a dark sky, right? The dark sky is how effortful the pose is. All right, so now what are we gonna do? So remember, just to remind you, so the way that this pose, um, so this is Trikonasana, right? So the way you come into it in the Angar style is you bend this leg into something that's kind of like Virabhadrasana 2, right? You bend this leg and then you step forward with this back foot, right? And you got a bent leg and then you straighten it out and you come into, not a coincidence, these are 1 page, 2 pages apart, right? Well, so check out the order of this. This is so freaking smart, this book. So here's Trikonasana. The next pose they have is Parsvakonasana. You can see Ardha Chandrasana happening here already. They're bending. There's going to be a dynamic twist here, right? And then makes sense. I'm not going to try to explain why they go there. Here's Virabhadrasana 2, and then Ardha Chandrasana. Ardha Chandrasana combines all of those poses, right? Right? And you come into it, right, from triangle pose. So I want you to, now we're going to start going into the smaller rooms, right? Okay, so now I want you to lean over to the left, get yourself grounded, because you can't be strong without grounding, right? And you're going to you've done this a lot. You're going to push on this back leg, right? Push down on the back hip, right? And if you have to do it on your armrest, fine. But if you push down here, let it be a surrogate for your femur bone, right? And so you're getting this earth flying with the chest, earth flying, right? Because eventually this leg is going to have to be the up leg, right? Now I'm going the other way. Earth flying, earth flying, right? Remember, this pose, yoga poses, have a face with a view. So when I go from earth to flying, I want you to start seeing the whole pose, right? Okay. So another core action. So one of the things that is very difficult for a traditional, but more traditional body to realize in all standing poses, but especially coming to be tested in Ardha Chandrasana, is that the legs have to act independently to truly be unified. So they're doing different things and they still have to come into a one thing, right? And that's a little tricky. So and remember, there's this dynamic part of the pose that you got one, here's the up leg and here's the down leg. And I told you that the turn of the spine is really important, right? But you got to get these two legs being connected and separate. We're going to practice that deep in near the base of your spine, right? So instead of worrying about the legs going out, the back leg, that's where more traditional students think of it. They think about trying to get the leg up. No, we're going to be super focused on the dynamic intersection between the two, right? And that's going to happen while we're seated. All right. So, and we want this to have the rhythm of flying. So I want you to come forward. So project your butt bone on your left leg forward and bring your spine with it, right? And then go back and then do it on the other side. And I can't do it as well on this side, right? My projection on my right hip is different. So I got to figure out a different technique. So I'm trying to get my right hip and knee to go out while I draw back my left hip, right? Right. In fact, I'm going to go back to the first side. So I just thought of something on how to do it, right? So I'm going to put my forearm on my left leg, and I'm going to push down on it to push it out, right? As I draw back my femur bone on my right leg back. So I'm getting a sense of this moving out, this moving back. In fact, I'm grabbing the outside of my thigh and pulling it back as I lean on this leg and drive this femur bone out, right? So I'm doing this, and look what it does to your spine. You start to feel the twist. Now I got to do it the other way, which isn't going to be as easy, right? I got such different sides on my body. So I'm going to put my hand back on my hip, my forearm on my leg. I'm going to hit down, find the earth, push down, and pull my other femur bone back. And I'm wanting them to talk to each other. So I'm going back and forth. I'm feeling that one femur bone, one leg is going to go one way, one leg is going to go another way. And I'm trying to feel it at the hub of the wheel, right? Oh, I like that. I can start to see the pose now, right? I can start seeing it coming into fruition. So we're going to the other side. Again, we're trying to differentiate the legs by using reference, right? So my brain can let into my mind that there's my base of my spine, the prana of the base of my spine can move in multiple directions. Prana goes in every direction at once. So I'm just trying to become part of what's already happening. I'm not just trying to do it. So I'm forward again. Oh, I've got an extra little trick, but I got longer arms than most of you, right? So I'm pushing down here, right? I got my hand back here. I can even put my fingers on my knee, right? So you might not be able to do this. So I'm pushing down and lengthening this femur bone. I'm hitting back on this knee. I'm hitting back on this hip. And I'm turning my spine into the twist. That's going to be what it is to come up in this pose. We've done this twist before, and then go to the other side, right? So I've got earth connection. I'm actually, in this one, it's not going to work as well for me, my hand on my hip. I'm going to put it on my armrest. And I'm going to push this leg out, this leg in, and turn. right? Because that, and I want you to start to see that with the flying. Okay, and then release. So now I want you to just go back to something more simple. Because remember, this, so just like it's surprising for a traditional student to realize that their femur bones can be traveling and moving in different directions, right? We're not used to it either, especially because we sit so much. So I want to simplify this action again. And by the way, I can tell that I'm getting somewhere in my chronic body because I'm beginning to get really thirsty. Okay, so now I'm gonna front of my hand here, on my knee, and I'm just gonna hit back on this leg and forward on the other knee. And then I'm gonna switch, right? I'm gonna go the other way, push back on this and forward. So this knee is getting pushed away, this knee is getting pushed back. But I'm trying to register the sensation at the base of my spine of what happens. Then I'm gonna go the other way, right? I'm gonna push this one and hit this one back. So I'm trying to register when I start to get movement in the core of my pelvis, I'm registering how it feels like as a twist. So when this leg gets pushed forward and this one gets pushed back, put your thumbs up if you can feel your spine twisting. Right? Can you feel that? Yeah. So now I go the other direction. This is the core of Ardha Chandrasana, right? Is when you start to get that the legs can create a twist, right? So I'm going back with this leg, out with this leg, and registering the twist because eventually I got to fly with that twist, right? Right? This is going to be the epicenter of the twist of the flying. So I'm doing it now. I'm going to do it more rhythmically, go back and forth. But I want you to see the pieces before you just go back and forth in rhythm. The thing about rhythm, it's revealing, but it also covers up the dynamic actions underneath. And we love the feeling of the rhythm, but now I want you to do the rhythm back and forth, right? Seeing the pieces of what's happening, right? Back and forth. All right, so now I want to remember the air again. So I'm going to lift up. My God, I've spent too much time. We're going to maybe get to this pose once, right? So I'm lengthening the spine again. Remember, we're building sensations here to have the whole pose, to see a face with a view, right? So now, eventually, the most important part of the pose is what's happening in the base of the spine, right? So now I'm going to, but there is the flying part, right? Because one arm is down and one arm's up. So I'm going to lean forward. I'm going to hit back on my knee, right? We've done this pose a lot. Now, what I don't want you to do, so I want you to feel all the work we've just done in the legs. Because I don't want you just to take this arm up like you always do. I want you to take, as you get the dynamic action in the twist, one femur bone forward, one femur bone back, right? I want you to, as you lift your arm, I want you to lift your arm in a way that makes you feel your legs more. So not just this. See how I'm not feeling my legs at all? I want this, right? I want this going back, this going forward, this flying, right? You need the wings attached to the body. One more time. Remember, I'm not just moving the outer body here. I'm hitting down, I'm pushing out, I'm hitting back, and I'm opening my arm. Right? Now I got to go to the other side. We got to do it like 5 times. Down, back, differentiating the legs, opening the arm. Do it again. Down, back, The twist already started to happen. The arm is a consequence, right? It's not quite a full twist, but I think you know what I mean. It's the inside of a twist. Down, back, flying. Again, down, back. The core opens. You start to fly. Okay. One more time. Down, back, open. But my inner focus is on the connection between the sitting bones, between the femur bones. That's the hub of the wheel here. So now for the next part, and I'm so working so hard, I need to take some water. Oh, goodness. This is where we got to be careful. So I was in a class one time and was in a traditional class, and they were doing lunges, and I was trying really hard to, because I kind of know how to project my energy from my diaphragm. And I can remember the class. Have you ever heard me say you have more than one set of arms? You know what I'm talking about there? Like, don't just, those are some weird classes, but did anyone kind of get a sense of that you have, like, there's actually arms that come out of every part of your spine? That's why some of the drawings, the mythological drawings of like Shiva have so many arms, right? But, or is it Hanuman? I can't remember. I don't study that enough. But no, it's not Shiva. I think it's Hanuman that has all the arms, right? But the fact that it's just an evolutionary coincidence and effective that our arms grow out of this part of our spine, right? You have more arms. Well, guess what? You have more legs too. Okay, so this is going to start messing with you on the fact that you've got more sets of legs. So your legs are, for this time being, this class might have to go long, right? So warn you, you can jump off if you have to and miss the payoff. You're gonna have a set of legs where the femur bones are going this way, and you need to project one leg behind you. Now, don't do this with too much will, because that's what I did in that class, and I was dizzy for 2 days. When you start messing with having too many limbs, it's a little hard on the vestibular system. So for some of you people, be a little wary. Just follow along, right? Right? So, good God, what is he talking about? He's talking about prana. So now, from the diaphragm, which is the intersection of the physiological body and the subtle body, right? Without gripping the diaphragm too much, I want another set of legs, and this leg having an analog, and I'm finding it back. Actually, you know how we move through our own body with our arms in those twists the last few weeks? I'm actually taking that leg and moving it and putting my fist behind me to be able to like point from my diaphragm to a leg that's going back towards the floor, right? So I'm amplifying this sensation by hitting back on this knee, by hitting this leg forward. I'm from my inner core projecting energy back behind me. Now, how is my heel going to touch the ground? Of this leg, of the leg I don't have here, right? How am I going to do that? Well, do you know the sensation of earth? Find the earth from behind you and bring it through your chest, right? So you're not just twisting anymore. This leg is hitting back. This spine is beginning to fly, and you're projecting into another limb, right? Oh dear. Now can you separate your sitting bones? One sitting bone going back, One sitting bone going forward, one knee hitting back, one knee going forward. Good, and then release. Ooh, I might have hit pay dirt because I just got a huge rush of heat. So I've got to exhale a couple times because I just, so this is how I got myself dizzy before, right? I think I went too far. I tried too hard to follow the group. I didn't trust that I could see a face with a view. It's an easy mistake. Your mind wants feedback, so it pushes too hard. I just did it again, right? I won't be dizzy because I didn't do it for an hour, right? So here, I'm coming back. I'm gonna hit this leg out, hit this knee back. Now, from here, I'm gonna extend another limb back behind me. See, when I get it, I don't know about you, when I freaking get it, my chest opens more. Does anyone else have this feeling at all? Like, what the hell? All of a sudden, so when you're trying to have prana follow consciousness more than it follows breath, what you do is project the prana back, but you can't do that with your will, right? And then you start to have the rest of your body, your pranic body, come into alignment as if the leg was behind you. That's how I started to feel it in my chest. Okay, I'm gonna try it again, right? I'm down, I'm back. From my solar plexus, which is Uddiyana Bandha, but don't don't do it, right? Right. And now I'm going to start to see an extension of my energy to the back leg. Now I got to find the earth back there because I know what earth feels like. And my whole body needs to reconfigure around that. I'm finding earth from the air behind me. Good, and then release. Because you know how the elements are related, right? First side again. Because we're about to have the payoff, but whew, I gotta hurry. So the back leg going through space that isn't going through the space should start to ground you. So instead of your pose being constrained by just your twist, you're actually keeping energy going back for grounding, right? And then the arm comes up. Now you gotta fly. Keep the legs dynamic. All the legs. Good, and then release. Come back in the center. All the legs have to be dynamic. So I don't know about you, but so much of the pranic awareness comes from retention at first. So I'm wiggling around, so I stay here. This is how I screwed it up before. I didn't come back to something playful. Okay, so now the other leg, down, back, legs going back. I've got the legs forward for the earth. I got a leg going back because prana follows conscious more than follows breath. Don't you dare do that with your brain. Let your spine from the diaphragm reach back to the leg behind you. Let that leg submit enough to let the leg going through the space behind you ground you because you know the sensation of grounding. Follow it through your whole body. Raise your arm. Good, and then release. So in Ardha Chandrasana, right? Just like in Trikonasana. This bottom shoulder blade really matters. It has to hug the spine, right? So we're gonna do it one more time. And then we have one more variation, and then good luck. Hope you stay for Shavasana after this one. Okay, so I'm going down, I'm going back. The leg's going back, right? Because now, even though the leg is the arm, this leg, look how my arms and legs screwed up, right? My arm is going this way. It's actually down here. There's another set of arms going down there, right? I'm back here. From here, I'm having the leg go up behind me. I'm finding the earth. I'm flying by lifting my spine. I take this arm up, and by hugging the bottom shoulder blade into my body, the arm goes down to the floor. Now that's something everybody can do. The hugging of the spine. Now I gotta fly. Oh, good, and then release. Need a little prancy dancy in here because I was just in a pretty small room with a lot of high velocity water flying through my body, right? So I need to remember to let the spray come back. So I remember that I'm not in the small room, right? So down, back, right? I hit the leg back. Prana follows consciousness back behind me. I use my arm to help me feel the leg going back. I ground, I find the earth. I'm making sure the dynamic twist is happening between the change of direction in my sitting bones, right? My arm goes up. I start to fly. This shoulder blade goes in so the other arm can go down to the floor. I keep the 4 sets of arms and the 4 sets of legs all coming out of my spine, and I lengthen my spine into the pose. Good, and then release. So the light touch on the back heel of a more traditional pose in the black ankle, that's just earth, but it's earth coming through air, right? Because every element comes through every other element. So now for the final version, which isn't nearly as cool as what we just did, in my opinion. But for those of you that like to think about making the pose look a little bit more like it looks in the book, which I'm only relatively interested in, take your legs wide. No, don't fall out of your chair. So already your ability to find the earth is compromised, right? That's going to make it harder to project from the diaphragm into other limbs, right? But that's okay. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So now what's harder here is when you have your legs wide, when you go down here, it's harder to project a limb back behind you, right? Or see a limb back behind you because you don't have as much earth here to move from, right? So, but there's more freedom here. There's more air here, and that's part of the joy of the pose, right? And so I'm going to go up. This leg, though, although it's off to the side, I want it behind me more. So I still have 4 legs. I go up. This version of the pose is not nearly as demanding. But remember, I'm tucking the shoulder blade to get this arm down. I'm still trying to differentiate. It's hard to differentiate my sitting bones from each other to get the twisting part, right? So you got to still get the twisting part in the pelvis, but you get the flying part one, and that's fun. But I want you to be seeing Ardha Chandrasana, this dynamic twist, not just triangle pose. That's what's hard. There's not as much earth here. So triangle pose is easier to see than Ardha Chandrasana. Get that leg out this way. Right? Good, and then come on back. Over, down. Again, I have to find a way to get another set of legs this way, right? As I go and get into more space, I want to fly from my legs because Ardha Chandrasana flies from the legs. So it's harder when your legs are wide to fly from them, right? So I go open, but I want to get the dynamic action between my shoulder blades to help this arm go down. I want to have that also help me find my legs. So this is trying to be Ardha Chandrasana, not just triangle pose. Get the leg out behind you. Find the earth. Open. Good. And then release. So that line, find the earth, right? Something has to drop towards the earth in order for you to find it. You don't push towards the earth, right? And so when you're trying to find the earth in a limb that quote isn't there, you have to let it drop towards the earth and then receive. So now as we head towards Shavasana finally, rocking a little bit because I want to remember that the earth's going to give to me, even though I just went through a whole bunch of tomfoolery, chronic tomfoolery, right? I'm actually going to remember how to receive. So start to feel some symmetry. Align yourself. Because you got to take in the chair. I know that I'm really going to have to really try to, in a short amount of time, I'm really going to have to let the chair in. Let the chair support the flying part first. So soften your jaw, the inside of your mouth. Relax the skin on your forehead and face. Let your cheekbones deflate, your cheeks deflate. Let your mouth be a cave, but keep it receiving and open. Relax your belly to relax your throat. You're just an animal looking for a home. Find it in Shavasana. Share the same space with the universe for a minute or two. It will always receive you. Can you receive it? Feel your breath. Don't change it. Awareness doesn't have to change anything, but that takes a lifetime. Start to bring yourself back. Slightly deeper inhalation. Slightly longer exhalation. Thank your body. It's a face with a view. When you're ready, open your eyes slowly. Let the light in. Close them if you want to. Open them again. Thanks for hanging in long. I always, I don't know about you, but I'm totally spent, right? So that was a really hard class. I wonder, I always regret when I'm kind of, oh my God, you talk too much. But just think if I had taught the whole hour like this, we'd all be like, I'd have to, I wouldn't have to call an ambulance, but I'd have to go directly to bed. Right. So maybe I did it out of self-protection. And I don't know how this class worked. I got caught up in a couple of places, but as you come out of it, just start moving one knee forward and one knee back and get the differences between your legs. Just like if you take nothing else out of this class, that in order to realize pranic potential, you have to, the body has to go into pieces before it can be truly unified. So you need to be able to this is a line from Bika Sengar, you need to be able to differentiate. And as we sit so much, the base of our spine tends to lose its differentiation, right? And you need not to do that. So right now, it's like I'm rocking really quietly back and forth, one sitting bone back, one sitting bone forward. And I'm remembering whether or not I get multiple sets of limbs, right? I don't always have to do that to feel the hub of the wheel. And when I do get the differentiation between my legs and my finger bones, and I lift my chest, it makes me want to inhale. I want to touch it and have it. That's a sign that something good happened for me. So, all right, I'll stay on after. We can revisit Ardha Chandrasana, but I can't go through that depth. But when we revisit again, for people that weren't in this class, they're going to go like, what the hell is he talking about? But I think I will revisit this some more because I want to do better, right? So, all right, everybody, have a good